Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another edition of our Titan York webinars. Pretty excited about this one. It's come up quite a bit in the recent days. Just a couple of notes before we get going. We are posting all of our webinars on our YouTube channel. And so if you jump on YouTube, search Titan York Realty. We try to build on it each week, and there's some good topics in there, so check it out. Also, feel free to visit us at titanyork.com. We have a sign up for a newsletter. We're pushing out new relevant information every month in newsletters, and it's a great way to sort of keep up to date. Our topic for today is around returning to work and what that'll look like. And of course, this is a pretty fluid situation in terms of there's new information every day, as well as not all of this that we're going to be talking about is applicable to every business. So it really is a matter of opinion. What we're trying to do here is bring our experience, the discussions that we've been having with clients, landlords, and other industry professionals to sort of address what the issues are going to be. And we're looking forward to getting into it. There's going to be a discussion that you guys, that everyone's going to have not only amongst your teams, but as employers with employees, and we'll get into that a little bit more. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Marc Gerow, who is a good friend and colleague of mine. He is one of the top guys in our Vancouver office. Great to have you, Marc.
Anthony, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to see you as always. Really excited to be on here. Been following along with the TY webinar series. It's been great. An alternative stream and source to reach out to our tenants. It's great, and I'm really looking forward to sharing some of my insights on how we're getting prepared to open up our economy here in Vancouver. I think we're a couple weeks ahead of you guys in Ontario and Toronto, so I'm hopeful that some of my insights can give you guys a little bit of a framework of what to expect in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk with you because, as you mentioned, the latest that we've heard, at least to my understanding, Doug Ford is saying, beginning of June for us, which puts us about 2 weeks behind you guys. And so it's a real benefit to have you on today and to hear what you guys are talking about over there and your conversations with tenants and landlords and that sort of thing. So really excited to have you here.
A pleasure to be here.
Okay, well, as we sort of discussed, the great debate is working from home or returning to office. And if you're returning to office, what does that look like? I think it's again important to note that this is a fluid situation, and by next week we might have more updates to this. But given all the information that we have at the time, I think we have some valuable information here about what it's going to look like and what the options are, and at least what the discussion should be like moving forward. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna let you sort of open it up, because what you've brought to the table here is pretty interesting, and this is your four-phase process for BC, and maybe you can let us know where this information is from and how you came about it.
Yeah, so just over the past week or so, we've unraveled a four-phase plan. The provincial government has worked closely with Dr. Bonnie Henry is our provincial health officer. She's been really leading the charge here in Vancouver and British Columbia. And they've also collaborated quite closely with WorkSafe BC on different policies for different industries and businesses. So I would definitely advise all of the Vancouver tenants tuning in and British Columbia tenants to reach out to your associations. I'm sure they're on top of all of these WorkSafe BC protocols, but here we are today at phase one. This is quite similar to where you guys are at. Essential health services, food and agriculture, industry, manufacturing, transportation, banks, these things have remained open with enhanced protocols. We've seen the wayfinders in the grocery stores, the waits outside and so forth. So this is probably very familiar to what life has looked like over in Ontario. This upcoming long weekend, we're rolling into phase two. It's going to be officially now Tuesday, where a lot of these retail-based sites, restaurants, cafes, and most applicable for our business, Anthony, is the office-based work sites. So all offices will be permitted to open up on Tuesday, ensuring that they follow these WorkSafe BC protocols. So That's where we're at. That's what we're looking forward to. It's going to be kind of an interesting time. I'm sure not everyone will rush back at once, but there will definitely be some cafes and offices have already planned to open up on that Tuesday. Then we'll roll into phase 3, which is going to be throughout June and September. Big one here for us in Vancouver is the film industry. It's one of our largest drivers to the economy. They're a big occupier of commercial space, whether it be industrial or office. We actually did the Warner Bros. Head office here, 50,000 square feet downtown. So it's a big driver for our economy, and we're really looking forward to that. And of course, a lot of the recreational things like hotels, resorts, and those will be opening up for the summer, which everyone's really excited about. And then phase 4, a little bit more bleak. The concerts, large scale events, Leafs games, Vancouver Canucks games, those sorts of things. Doesn't look like we'll be attending those events until we have a vaccine or a herd immunity. We don't know when that's going to be. So what that tells me is we really need to understand more what this new normal is going to be like in these workplaces and these commercial spaces, and get ready for that sort of new normal, because those social distancing protocols are going to be in place until we have that herd immunity and vaccine. And I know we're all keen to get back to work.
Yeah, that's interesting because we're starting to see a little bit, not so much a serious talk of opening, but there's this discussion of how that's going to happen. And I thought it was interesting to point out, like the restaurants, cafes, pubs, that sort of thing. There's a proposal in Toronto to close down, I think it's something like 42 streets for primarily pedestrian only. I mean, there'll be localized traffic if you have to access your apartment building or something. And what they're doing is they're allowing these businesses to sort of spill out onto the sidewalk and street a little bit. I'm sure there'll be some restrictions, but allowing them to sort of expand, or at least, or potentially even create new outdoor space so that they can fit a few more people. You can go and enjoy a meal and still be, physically distanced. You can be outside, which will be great until we hit October kind of thing. But for the summer, I thought that was a pretty unique idea.
Yeah, I was similarly here in Vancouver. I was talking to a friend who runs a brewery, and they were pouring a concrete pad and getting it all ready out in front of their garage door, where they're going to have that open concept patio. And similarly, they'll build a boardwalk out for flow of pedestrian traffic, but the municipality is being very forgiving to restaurants, retail, and cafes and so forth, to allow them to reopen and maybe adjust the flow of traffic, so that they can occupy and get the right amount of people into their premise.
Yeah, that's cool. So the big sort of overall topic here is working from home or returning to office, and obviously this is on a case-per-case basis, and different industries will have different criteria, and even different companies within those industries will have different perspectives. But I think it's important to sort of note that I'm foreseeing some clashing of minds between employers and employees. I think the notion of working from home is comfortable. I think people have started to get used to working in their pajamas per se. And they're going to, really look to continue that. Whereas an employer's perspective might be, we need you back in office for productivity. And, my biggest concern with the working from home isn't necessarily the productivity, because again, that's going to be, a case per case, depending on your industry, but it's going to be maintaining that corporate culture. And I think, companies spend a lot of time and a lot of money developing that culture. And I think that, it speaks to employee retention. I can, think of a few friends who've received job offers from other companies and decided to stay because they like their team that they're working with, the collaboration, like there's a good thing going, that money isn't everything. And if everyone switches to a remote working, I have a concern about your ability to maintain that culture. And, when someone else comes knocking on an employee's door and is offering to pay a little bit more, there's not that connection with their coworkers, or at least it's not as strong as before. I wonder what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that we've seen a little bit of a shift prior to COVID of primarily technology firms where, they're adapting to this work from home corporate policy where, if you have the option to work from home, if need be, Monday to Wednesday, come in for your huddle up meeting on Thursday, whatever it may be. So I think that those businesses are going to, they're not going to be in a huge rush to get back to the office. They may have already been more adapted to the work from home process, but there's a handful of tenants and businesses that I've spoken to that are eager to get back. They've been living on top of each other in their condos or their homes. They don't have the home office, and naturally people, I believe, are social beings, and going to work, like you said, it is a employee retention thing, and it's also just a way of life for most people. You get up in the morning, you take the train, you drive to work, you leave your home, and maybe you see some friends downtown and you get a beer after work, whatever it may be. But that's a piece of life that I know a lot of people are missing and eager to get back. But I think what we're going to talk about today is how you can effectively and safely do this, because no employer wants to put their employees in danger, and we want to make sure that everyone's going to be doing this in a healthy and safe way. So there's going to be different approaches for different businesses, and I'm looking forward to running through this with you guys.
Yeah, definitely. I think, the overriding sort of idea behind this webinar is to encourage dialogue. Exactly. Between decision makers, between your employees. This is a new space for everyone, and everyone is learning how to function within that space for the first time. And it's going to take educating people. It's going to take setting guidelines and instilling those from the top down. And I think it's important, in order to come to this criteria, to discuss with everyone what the concerns are and where a lot of those anxieties or fears are lying. And that'll enable an employer to take action, set it into place some protocol that will help overcome those challenges, not only from an anxiety perspective, but also maintaining as safe of a workplace as possible.
Yeah, I just want to touch quickly on what you had said before about, this is a changing situation. Obviously, it's every day it seems like, there's a new guideline, or maybe you need to wear a mask, maybe you don't. So at this time, with businesses opening a few days from now, or office-based work sites opening a few days from now, it's a really good time to start this dialogue and send out a survey or a questionnaire to your employees. Like, that is what we're seeing a lot of businesses do here, getting ready in anticipation for, and they have been over the past weeks, getting ready for, oh, well, we're allowed to go back to work now. See how your employees feel about this, and ask them some questions and start the dialogue, because it is premature. We aren't open yet.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I actually really like that idea of sending out a survey. I would encourage people to do that for sure. It's great to get thoughts, and you can't put these systems into play without knowing what those areas of concern are. So I think that's a really great idea. So we're going to talk about, some of that protocol, what that looks like. And I think, in order to start it off, it's important to address the areas of concern. And one of those are controllable areas, and the others are non-controllable areas in terms of your own ability to control those variables within those areas. And so controllable, we're talking about inside your premises. So walk in your door, drywall to drywall, where the problem issues are. And this is stuff that a business owner can make changes now, and start to become prepared for when that workforce does return. And so I think it's a great opportunity to sort of talk about some of those areas. This is a photo that some of you may have seen already. I pulled it out from a Business Insider article, but I think it has great value here, because this is very reminiscent of a lot of tech offices. This is actually a call center from South Korea, and it shows, what I think we both would agree is a fairly standard setup for many businesses. And so the idea is that every blue seat contracted the virus. And it's interesting to note a couple seats in particular being these end seats that seem to be one of the most common seats to contract it. And that might be, because those people have to walk by all of these people in close quarters, or that people are circling them going around that desk. Who knows? But, this is 44% of the workers there got sick. And I love talking about this guy here. how he or she did not get infected is maybe playing hooky from work that day or something. But there's some real issues here, and it's not just about those seats are close together. It's not just about removing every other seat and staggering them, so one here, one here, one here, kind of thing. It really comes down to furniture solutions, which we'll talk about shortly, but also circulation. And circulation is not air circulation. It is walking between your workstations to the kitchen, to the printer, to the washroom. How do people within your space move, and how do you manage that traffic?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to pull up that example again, because clearly there's issues here. You can't walk between these seats and maintain physical distancing. So this is a real issue here. And so what we did is provide just a sort of rough idea of what it could look like. And what we did here is remove 3 of these rows and added and spread them out a little bit further. And what this allows you to do is to have these sort of aisleways between seats that people can walk through and still maintain distance from their colleagues sitting down. And you might have, we're going to talk about wayfinders in a little bit, but you might have unidirectional aisleways so that people aren't bumping shoulders as they're walking by. Or you're just going to try your best to not do that, but keep away from these people sitting.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the important thing when we're talking about this is going to be, what you're doing when you spread these tables out are increasing your circulation rate. And on a standard basis, for a typical office, we're talking about 30 to 35% of your floor plate is used to walk around these areas. With a layout like this, you're going to be closer to that 50% mark. So you're actually adding a 15% increase of circulation to accommodate that physical distancing. And that means that 50% of your floor plate is essentially hallways. And that number is pretty staggering when you look at that. But however, that's going to be crucial.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk more about it on the next slide, but it's important to note that not only will you need to do this, but not everyone will be able to occupy all of those seats there. So you're going to need even more space than you think.
Yeah, it's funny. So this is actually we used this in our webinar last week. We sat down with our good friends from T Plus Studio who helped put together these floor plans. And this is another pretty standard looking office on the left. This is the original here. A couple private offices, your boardroom, your bench, hotel seating. Pretty typical of what you would see in most offices these days. Total square footage is just over 3,000. 31 people working in that space, consuming about 99 square feet per person. That's a bit on the lower end, 100 square feet per person, but it wouldn't be unheard of by any means. In fact, most will be between 100 and 150 probably. Mm-hmm. But you really start to see some problem areas here. First problem area is your workstations. We looked at that in the previous slide. There's some tight seating here. People are sitting right next to each other. There's no circulation space really between these desks. Mm-hmm. And the other problem areas are your meeting rooms, your boardrooms. Like, gone are the days of 10 or 12 person boardrooms where everyone's sitting in their chair. It's just not going to happen for the near future. Mm-hmm. And on the right side, we have our new proposed layout. And you can see what's happened here is we've reduced seats here and staggered them. We've removed one of these rows to increase that circulation between these desks. We've converted our boardroom and meeting areas into workspaces now. So from a 10-person office to 10-person boardroom to a 4-person workspace. Even the kitchen has been closed down and revamped to workspace as opposed to a communal eating area. And even as far as these offices, removing those seats because no one's going to want to sit across from someone having a conversation. It's not going to happen anymore. Mm-hmm. So the end result with this was that we've maintained our square footage. We've reduced the amount of people so that only 20 people are actually working out of this plan, which has resulted in the increase from 99 square feet per person to 153 square feet per person. And you have 35% of your staff now working from home. And I think, I'm going to let you, I know you have a comment or two about this. I think this is going to be a pretty typical setup, at least coming out of the gate for companies.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The trend has been for the past 10, 15 years where you're trying to get as many people into workstations and tight quarters as possible, and then build out these communal workspace areas or beanbag rooms or foosball ping pong table areas for that sort of employee retention. But that's just not going to work for this interim time. I think it's really important to note here that this is actually quite a simple solution to a decent problem. You're not having to knock down walls and get building permits here, building new offices or whatever it may be. In fact, it's quite simply just a furniture solution, and then readjusting the circulation of your office, which is going to be, I think, the immediate approach for people to try to get back into the office as quickly as possible and not make any quick snap call decisions on what they need to do. And essentially, it gives me hope for a lot of companies that have different business units and different types of their workforce that may need to be in the office. Say every day, other people might not need to be in, so they could be part of that remote workforce of 35%. But I think this is a very standard office build out, and I just love the diagram that T Plus Studios has put together. It's very applicable.
Yeah, and you're bang on. Like, they didn't even have to get new furniture for this.
Yeah.
This is a solution that you can almost implement, almost overnight, and get people back to work and start up that company again. And I think you were bang on talking about, going for permits and do construction is not really going to be an option because you're looking at months before you can get back to it. And so this is a pretty cheap, affordable solution. And we're actually going to be talking more about furniture next week, and what, the actual desk might look like if there's modifications you're going to put on. But right off the bat, we have a pretty good solution here. I think it's important to notice as well, wayfinders, and you've started to see them in supermarkets where they have these unidirectional aisles. Of course, some people are better at following those than others. But the reality of the situation is that these wayfinders are going to be a big part of our lives. And I think, for the most part, you're going to see these stay for a long time, even after, a year and a half, when hopefully there's a vaccine. I could still see supermarkets maintaining those unidirectional aisles because, the one biggest comment was not being prepared for this sort of pandemic. And so people aren't going to revert back to all of the old behaviors. Some of these are going to be lasting, we'll call it lasting scars on society. And I think wayfinders are important. And it might suck for this employee when he wants to run out to the washroom, that he or she is going to have to walk around that whole way to get out. Yeah. But, directing traffic, like we talked about, and keeping that circulation in mind is going to be a huge aspect of it. So I would look out for, potential wayfinders, and it's important that you're not bumping shoulders with someone when you're, passing by, and having this flow of traffic is going to be an important part.
Absolutely.
We wanted to break down a couple other common area concerns, and Mark, maybe you could take us through a couple of these, and your thoughts on them.
Yeah, I think I touched on the breakout areas a little earlier. It's just those are the sort of the communal employee satisfaction areas, whether it's the ping pong room or where you have your big kitchen lounge with your beer on tap and so forth, where your employees love to go to grab a coffee, an espresso, a beer after work, and talk about the day's work or maybe the latest Leafs loss, because that's normally what we're talking about over there. Just kidding. Those are going to have to be revamped into workspaces. If you're going to get your employees back into the office, you're not going to be able to utilize that for communal areas. It's just not going to work with the amount of cleaning and disinfecting that you're going to need to do to all those communal chairs and so forth. So that will be revamped into workspace or shut down if you don't need to revamp it. The printers, we're thinking that most people are going as digital as possible these days, but still every office has a printer. And I think that you're going to have someone coming by every few hours and just wiping it down, disinfecting it, making sure that you're on top of that. And then you also should have a hand sanitization little device there. I think that you should have those spread out throughout your office, maybe at the entrance, by the printer, by all sort of communal areas where there's going to be that touch aspect. And then door handles, you've got the best idea I've heard yet. You just first one in, leaves the door open, for the remainder of the day. Might be a little louder in the hallways, but you can't really have people coming in and touching the door. If you got 100 people coming in your office, that's just silly. And you should keep these doors open throughout the office, really. It's going to be important for the circulation of airflow as well. So keep the doors open. Kitchen is, I might, put this one in on the survey with your employees and so forth. I know that, uses of fridges and sinks are really important for people who bring their lunch to work and so forth. But it's going to be really difficult to maintain those things and disinfect them constantly, right? Like you're going to have the water cooler, for example. How often is that used in a day by your average employee? Like 3 to 5 times by me. That's 300 or 500 times a day if you have 100 people. So that's you might need to hire 3 or 5 employees just to wipe that water cooler down. So I think that it's a good. It'll be an important one to ask your employees, but I would maybe advise on shutting that down just out the gate. I just can't really see a solution for it just yet.
Yeah, I think you're right. And we're having that discussion internally for our office as well. And I think until, there's more information and better understanding and behaviors are sort of instilled in employees, I think you kind of have to close those areas off.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a challenge too, because, you look at the breakout areas in the kitchen. These are 2 areas that really boosted company morale. They're popular spots. A lot of companies keep their kitchen stocked with coffee and snacks and whatever it may be. And these breakout areas were great ways to relax with your coworkers. And with those closed and probably being used for workspace, that's going to have a bit of an impact on the day-to-day lives of employees. So, bringing your lunch, something that doesn't have to be microwaved. You don't have to use plates because you use your wrapper for your sandwich or whatever it might be. It's going to be a shift for people, big time. And hopefully it doesn't, affect company morale too much. I mean, I think everyone's going to be excited to see each other, but that kitchen is, even in a household, people tend to revolve around that kitchen unless you're sitting at your desk. So it's going to be a tough adjustment, but I think you're bang on where out of the gate, I think it's best to close it down until you can develop some stronger protocol.
Yeah.
So, we talked about the controllable areas, and a big part of people coming back to work are the non-controllable areas. These are areas that you have little to no ability to change. So the lobbies, the hallways, bathrooms, elevators, and a big one, of course, is public transport. And, we're talking about bringing people back to work, and I'm blessed in the sense that I get to walk to work, and I'm lucky like that. But most people don't have the ability to walk and don't have a car accessible. So they're going to be asked to take public transport. And so what we're asking these employees to do is to get onto the most densely populated areas that they'll encounter that day twice to get to and from work. And I think in your discussions with employees that are taking public transport should be prioritized in that discussion. We need to understand how they feel about it. Forcing someone to do this is going to be a real challenge, but it's also prioritizing them in the way that they interact within that office. Are these people given, first dibs to work remotely until the situation clears a little bit? Or if maybe when they come in, we try to find a way that has them a little bit more isolated, considering they are going to be higher risk. Maybe they get the private offices or sit on one side of the office, or I don't know what it looks like, but I think it's going to be important to open that dialogue and prioritize those people that are taking public transport in. Once we've gotten to the building, great, but now it's entering into that building. And we have some examples here from Asia about how they're addressing this. And it is single file getting into that building. They are doing required temperature checks. There's these sort of waiting blocks outside of elevators and inside of elevators. And I understand that, Marc, I think you spoke with a couple of the larger landlords and have some insight to this.
Yeah, for sure. My understanding is that there will be no temperature checks upon entrance to the building. There will be these stanchions and lineups are quite accurate. There will be a security guard or individual just monitoring the situation in the lobbies and foyers. There'll be increased cleaning of these lobbies and elevators and those common areas and so forth. Elevator waiting zones as well, 3 to 4 to an elevator depending on your landlord. And the other thing is masks. So both the major landlords I've spoken to have different positions. They vote masks are advised by one. They're not going to be able to provide them. They'll have disposal areas for masks, but they're advising that you do that, but not required. Another landlord is going to be requiring that you wear a mask in the elevator. So mixed approaches. I'm sure that these will be changing as everything does and is, but that's the news that I have for now.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. And the mask debate has been something that's changed throughout this whole pandemic, and you know, the government's stance on it has shifted, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it shift again. You know, you've already started to see countries make it mandatory when you're in public spaces and you can't abide by that 6-foot radius, that it's mandatory to wear. So, you know, I think like many of these, you know, items when we're talking about landlords, you know, landlords are going to be proactive and make areas safe, but if it's not required to do that, they're going to be pretty hard pressed to make people wear a mask, for example.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, the elevators is going to be a big problem. In our building, it's 2 people per elevator. And the amount of time it's going to take to fill up that building, although it's going to be at a lower capacity. You know, you might have staggered entrance, but when it comes down to lunchtime and 5 p.m., it's going to be a bit of a logistical nightmare to get everyone out. And it'll be really interesting to see how that impacts the desirability of floors. You know, historically, the higher floor you are, the more prestige it has. And if there's an option to get the top floor, you're going to go for it. I wonder, and I'm not making speculation here, I'm just sort of posing the question for thought piece is, you know, will there be a change of desirability for lower floors where you can just take the stairs instead of waiting for the elevator? And I think, you know, the staircases have their own challenges. You know, you would want each staircase to be, you know, one up, one down kind of thing. And you don't want people bumping into each other. And then there's handrails. You know, everybody's being locked up in quarantine for 3 months. Fitness levels have probably dropped. There's going to be some heavy breathing walking up those stairs. You know, is there concern about tracking those particles now in on your shoes? So do you have any thoughts about that? I mean, I thought it was just an interesting concept.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I mean, I was speaking to an individual from the Bank of Montreal about this, and he noted that elevators are going to be a problem, and also he said that the priority of floor for executives may have shifted because after 9/11, the Bank of Montreal moved all their executives down to the lowest floor they had in the building. And that was true across most of the banks in Toronto. So, I mean, obviously there was a reaction to that event. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a reaction to this event as well. If you're an executive and you have floors throughout many of the buildings, maybe your office is now on a lower floor. I think in the short term, you might maybe see some people want to pick up subleases, but long term, I don't know if we're going to see those big head leases going into lower floors just yet. It's maybe a little bit too premature, but it is undoubtedly going to be the biggest challenge of getting back to within the building will be the elevators.
Yeah, I agree. Another you know, point of discussion is going to be washrooms. This is unavoidable. If you're going to the office for, you know, 8-ish hours a day, you're going to have to use the washroom. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I don't see a lot of changes happening to the washrooms. I don't think it's completely necessary. I think if landlords, and we're talking, you know, higher caliber landlords, want to invest into touchless soap and water dispensers, if they're not already in there, great. You know, I think you will see paper towels and no more hand dryers. The Dyson Blade hand dryers are probably not going to be hugely popular. But I think general behavior in washrooms indicates that you're washing your hands after use. You're using your paper towel to foot shimmy technique to get out and throwing away that paper towel. I think that just continues. I just don't see, you know, people investing into touchless entry where they're going to have motion sensor doors for washrooms. I just don't see it happening. And so, it is going to be a point of contention and a point of conversation with your employees. I know when I go to the washroom, I come back out more often than not, I open that door to be nose to nose with someone who's on their way in.
Sure.
And so there's going to have to be, you're just going to have to think twice about, when you're using that, and using regular hand washing as you should be anyway is just going to be the protocol. But I don't see a lot other changing, but it is something you should talk to your employees about.
Yeah. I mean, I would just add quickly that it's a great thing. It's a great point to put on your questionnaire survey that you send out to your employees. Landlords and pre-COVID, they were sending out bulletins and reminders about how to wash your hands and so forth within your building. I'm sure we all saw them. Those will still be there. But I'm sure you're going to have employees that are concerned about it, and it's just a great thing to get ahead of and address.
Absolutely. Yeah. An interesting one is HVAC and air quality. There is a debate on the viability of these virus particles being suspended in the air. And there's been a few different studies. None of them, I don't think, have been all that conclusive in terms of, if someone sneezes on the 8th floor, is someone on the 7th floor at risk? Mm-hmm. Naturally, you think, okay, it's coming from water droplets from your mouth. Those settle to the ground pretty quickly. However, it's been proven that they do stay suspended in air for a certain period of time. In fact, speaking loudly, I was reading an article a few days ago that said, even when you're speaking loudly, there's a potential for those particles to be suspended in the air for 14 minutes. And of course, as those droplets evaporate, they get lighter and become suspended for a longer period of time. And so, there's a lot of debate between, if you're in an office building and again, someone sneezes in one office, is someone else at risk? And I don't think we're going to see a lot of changes here. There's not enough conclusive evidence to say that, someone on the 8th floor is at risk from a 7th floor sneeze or vice versa. And I think, updating your HVAC system is a very costly endeavor. Right. And until there's concrete evidence that needs to be required, I don't think we're going to see it. A natural, easier solution would be, okay, we're just going to start installing filters more frequently throughout the system. Mm-hmm. The challenge with that is with increased filters and also higher grade filters in terms of like your HEPA filters that capture these particles, it really reduces that airflow throughout that system. And you could be barking up a bit of another tree here where you reduce airflow into humid summer temperatures. There's potential for maybe mold to grow in that system. And then you're dealing with a different airborne issue. Yeah. So I just don't see landlords making these changes. I think it's important because your employees will probably ask about it. I think it's important to be a little bit knowledgeable and have that discussion. And maybe you bring in a portable air purifier. I don't know if that's going to make a big difference, but it might, make people feel better. There's not enough evidence out about this. So I just don't see dramatic changes happening. If you're lucky enough to have operable windows in your office space, get those bad boys open. It's almost summer. Yeah. Unfortunately, most of us in commercial buildings don't have that luxury of having operable windows, but, bring in that air filter and put it in your own office, because I just don't see landlords making the move here.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely too premature. I mean, most of the downtown workforce lives in condos anyways, right? So you're on the 10th floor of the condo, there's someone in your condo on the 20th floor that has it. I mean, you're at the same risk there. So I haven't really, I'm going to preface, I'm not a scientist and neither are you, so we can't give any sort of real advice on this. We can just tell you what the discussions are, and we would just advise that you have a preliminary discussion. Again, a great thing to add to your survey with your employees, letting them know that you're monitoring this, you're on top of this. There's no evidence yet that, you're at risk from something like this. And furthermore, I think all these things really do tie in, these not controllable areas. They tie into, if you're in a building in a landlord or a portfolio with someone who is potentially an institutional landlord, an A-class, AAA class landlord, they're going to have the capital to reinvest into all of these new systems if need be. So there may be a shift in demand towards these landlords.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah, I think when we're talking about all these items, I think it's just, a point I want to get across is it's going to be important for employers to be proactive in generating these discussions. And I
Mhm.
think it's inevitable that people are going to ask about the washrooms or the HVAC or the common areas, and being prepared, and coming to that conversation with a plan, or at least some information is going to help everyone feel a lot better. It's going to help those conversations go, flow a little bit easier. And I think you'll be able to draw some pretty good conclusions out of that. So now that we talked about, our controllable and uncontrollable spaces, we're really left with one of three options. And a couple of these, one of these is more viable than others.
Mhm.
The first one is, we can work remotely. We have no problem. We're Twitter. Jack Dorsey says we can work from home indefinitely. You might see companies do that and say, okay, we're going to get rid of our office. The tools for working from home are already in place. We're happy with what's going on here. No need for an office.
Mhm.
And that's their current lease, is likely has some term left, so it's going to be subleased. The second option is really what I think we're going to see right out of the gate, and it will be most applicable to most industries, is that hybrid, similar to that floor plan that T Plus put together.
Mhm.
Was, we're letting 35% of our staff or 50% of our staff work from home for 1 week, and then next week they'll come in, and vice versa, and this sort of rotating. And that way you can make those furniture, solutions and changes to accommodate the physical distancing, and you don't have to change your space right off the bat.
Mhm.
You're still functional within yours. And the third option is going to be, what I think some companies are going to look for. It's not going to happen right away, because bringing everyone back is going to require that you take on more space. So we have a question about availability. What's the vacancy rate in that building? Do you want separate, would a building across the street with additional space still work to bring everyone back? This is a longer term solution. And the funny thing is we're a little bit reliant on people following this first option, saying we're going to work remotely from home and give back our space, so that the number threes can adopt that space. And it's going to require this, one thing happening before the other. And I think we're already starting to see that sublease market start to warm up. So these are sort of, as we see it, your three options. And I think realistically, until you're finished with your term, or you have a longer term solution, most companies are going to be sitting in that number two option.
Sure. I think that, yeah, um, you know, we Anthony, you and we've had a lot of companies that have already come to us and asked them to sublease because they were going more remote prior to COVID. So if you're one of those companies that is just basically waiting to do this, you should get your sublease out immediately, because we are seeing quite an influx of subleases. That is the trend in the market right now. We haven't seen the landlords bring up any more head lease space. It hasn't appeared from thin air yet, and it won't until tenants start giving it back. And I think that it's a really good point that you mentioned, that number three doesn't happen without number one. So it'll be interesting to see how that all pans out. But we're starting to see that influx of subleases for sure here in Vancouver.
Yeah, definitely. And then the same thing here as well. It's starting to heat up, which really like brings us to our next point is, okay, we're trying to identify which option to go with. How do we do that? And our webinar last week, we went into this in greater detail. So I would encourage you guys to check out the webinar that we did with T Plus Studio. But working with them and sitting internally, we came up with this sort of space calculator to determine how much space you're going to need with that increased circulation, with the spread out workstations, and sort of determine your square footage if you're bringing everyone back, or how many people you could bring back within your space as it sits now. And this is a product of us being asked this question daily, multiple times a day. Companies are saying, well, how do I know, with what we know now, what are the requirements for physical distancing, and what's my office going to look like? And without putting a number to it, it's hard to choose one of these options. So we've developed a space calculator. We had one originally that was for your standard office, and then once the lockdown went, we sort of developed this one to accommodate for physical distancing. And every company has a different sort of look to this, but I think it's important to try to nail down quantifiable numbers that you can say, okay, this is how many people I can bring back, or this is how much space I would need to bring everyone back. And we encourage you guys to give us a shout, visit us at titanyork.com or shoot one of us an email that we'll have up at the end. And we're happy to take people through this and just, we're going to have to work together to get out of this one and get things started. And this is how we're, trying to contribute to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Market activity. I'm going to let you take a swing at this. You already sort of started to hint at it. So I'm going to let you take it from here.
Yeah. Well, as you know, Anthony, and I'm sure a lot of the tenants tuned in, that both Vancouver and Toronto are some of the tightest commercial office leasing markets in North America. I think we were sitting at about 2.5% downtown vacancy, 2% maybe Vancouver. It was very, very tight. So we haven't seen the landlords really budge yet. They are very well capitalized institutions, whether it's Ontario Teachers Pension Fund and other life insurance funds, or real REITs, real estate investment trusts. They have a lot of money and they will weather the storm, and they won't really soften their rates until they desperately need to. So if you're a tenant right now and you're in the market and you're looking for space, you're going to see your best deals coming from these subleases. And we're starting to see a lot of subleases pop up in areas which would be a gold mine prior to COVID, just because of the availability and the location, whether it be the downtown core, a discounted rate because the head lease was signed 3 to 5 years ago, and I mean, it's a great opportunity for tenants that are looking to get into the market, or maybe you're part of that number 3 group where, you're going to need more space. Maybe you're a law firm or you're a bank and you need to get back to the office because you're a client facing institution and you don't want to sign into a 7 or 10-year lease. You're going to have an opportunity to jump into a short-term solution, because there are a lot of companies, and I've seen most of the fit outs that have come online for subleases really remain true to a technology firm. And the assumption is that these firms are able to adapt because they've already been so remote to begin with, and they're not going to need that sort of client-facing workplace. Those are the spaces that are coming online. So it's going to be a great opportunity. I have some project-based groups that are excited about this opportunity because they were looking to start their project offices way out in the suburbs, and now it looks like they'll be able to get an opportunity in the downtown core.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, you hit the nail on the head with the vacancy rates. We're like 2.6% or something in downtown Toronto, and in Toronto wide, there's only about 700. This is a week or two ago, prior to the sublease market warming up a bit. There's only about 750,000 square feet of sublease vacancy, or sublease availability, I should say. And that doesn't sound like a small number, but that's a 0.03% of the market. So it is a tight market. It's going to warm up. And interestingly enough, like you sort of mentioned it, I had some clients call me and say, okay, there's got to be some deals with landlords. Like, they're going to look to fill up our buildings now. Like, they must be hungry for a deal. And vacancy rates in direct for direct options haven't changed.
No.
It's 3 months ago. People are still paying their rent. There's not many defaults that we're seeing in terms of office. Retail is a tougher market for that. Yeah. But people are still paying their rent. So the rates haven't dropped. And people are expecting, there's going to be concern because everyone's going to be working remotely. Landlords are not going to be proactive in dropping their rates. No. With this. They're going to wait for the market to change and those market conditions to change. And if it gets drastic, then that might encourage some changes from the landlord, but you're just not going to get those deals. And so you're absolutely right. Subleases are going to offer you not only potentially a more competitive rate, but also that short-term aspect is huge, because in 2 years from now, we are going to have a much better idea of what the new norm looks like and what our companies are going to look like for the long term. And so signing a shorter lease is going to give you that sort of buffer zone. So I think you're bang on. Yeah. I have thoughts, and I don't want to put too much speculation into this about suburban markets versus commercial, financial core. In my mind, financial core is probably going to be pretty safe in terms of little changes. suburban markets, though, I could see changes coming. I don't know if that means people are going to be leaving them or more people are going to be driven to them because of cheaper rates and more availability. So there's been no real evidence to show that those, to know what those changes are going to be like. But I am curious to see how that unfolds in the coming months.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can touch on a scope that I've been discussing with some people in the industry about the downtown market and the A and the B class landlords is, there was sort of a trend prior to COVID over the past couple of years where companies are really looking at healthy and safe landlords to bring their employees to. These LEED, there was the big movement toward the LEED Gold, LEED Platinum buildings, and making sure that it's an environmentally safe building, it's hygienic and so forth. So a lot of these A-class towers are already very well suited and situated to begin with. Maybe they already all have the touchless hand dryers and the systems in place and the dispatch elevators and so forth. That I think for a lot of companies and a lot of businesses such as law firms or banks, any sort of client-facing business where you're having a client coming into your office, you're going to want them to feel comfortable when they walk into your building. And I think that you're going to see the demand remain very strong for these A and AAA class buildings because they're going to be able to adapt. They have lots of capital, and they're going to weather the storm. I think the buildings that may struggle are the C-class buildings, where they maybe aren't as well capitalized, maybe a mom and pop sort of shop landlord, a family-owned business, and it may be their retirement plan. You know what I mean? They may not be ready to inject more money and invest into it. So it will be interesting to see how it all shakes out. I think that you're onto something with the suburban market. I don't think it's going to fare as well. Just because it's a matter of demand. Yeah, I mean, I guess the call here is, there isn't a ton of transactions happening quite yet. We're seeing these subleases come online, and you would almost even begin to say that it's starting to look like in a few weeks that might get saturated. So that doesn't mean there aren't deals happening and subleases aren't happening, but say in, 2 to 3 months from now, when you're making the decision, okay, maybe I should look to sublease now, you might be a little bit behind the gun because there's going to be a lot out there. And if you're looking to make that move, I think that you got to at least get it out on the market with the listing right now.
I agree. And for some people, it might seem early to start making these decisions, but now is really the time where, the light at the end of the tunnel is there for the most part. And we have to turn our heads to start trying to address these issues. And you're absolutely right. You want to be ahead of the curve here when you're getting your space out. And the sooner you get it out there, the more eyes there are on it, the more opportunities will come your way. Those are great points. So, in terms of final thoughts, I think what I would love for people to take away from this is now's the time to start that dialogue. Mm-hmm. Start talking internally, start thinking about what the office will look like. Whether you contact T Plus Studio or Titan York, start having the conversations with people that are involved in the marketplace and can help you come to those decisions. Everyone's willing to have a conversation these days. And I think, starting that motion now will really put you in a good position, that driver's seat and engaged in that. Like, I loved your idea of the survey, sending that out to your employees. I think that's a really great idea.
Yeah, no, I know. And I think that there's a lot of speculation articles coming out. You hear this news that Twitter is saying, and Jack Dorsey said, you guys can work from home forever. And, that's great. That's a great solution for a company like that. But there are hundreds of different types of businesses and industries that occupy office space, and they don't have the same requirements. And if you run a business where you have a collaborative workforce and you're feeling pressure from probably the most mobile company in the world, Twitter, I would just pause and, it is very, very premature for any sort of company that's been so collaborative in a workplace to make that sort of decision right now. But if you have, if if you've been moving and moving towards that for a while now already, and it's part of your corporate, structure, and a lot of companies do sell that to their employees, right? That mobile work ability for sure. It could be time to absolutely sublease that space, but it is, we're opening up here on Tuesday. It's a long weekend away. I don't anticipate the office towers to be more full than 15 to 20%. I think that people are really it's kind of the wait and see approach. But further to your point, it's time to send out that survey, speak with your senior leadership team, start the dialogue about what it looks like, what are other industries doing. I'd suggest looking to a lot of your associations, like the BC Restaurant Association has been a leader here for a lot of the restaurants and cafes about different layouts and how you can open up your restaurant safely and so forth. So I know there's a lot of different leaders within your respective business units and industries, and I'm sure that they're getting together good plans and industry norms for you. So we're happy to help you out and assist with you in a sublease, or if you need some help with rent deferral, we've had some success with that. So give us a call. There's action out there. It's starting to happen.
Yeah, definitely. I loved your point about not reacting too quickly to this work from home or work remotely. It's going to be the choice for a lot of companies. But just because people are talking about it, it's important that every company makes a decision that's best for them in the long term. And if you send your staff to work from home now, it's going to be difficult in 2 years when you say, no, we should have had the office. And even in office sizing trends, we've been on this sort of downhill slope where people are taking less space and squishing more bodies in. We've seen that happen before, and it is a bit like breathing. Like companies tend to expand and for more private office and then shrink down and more people work from home. And I wouldn't be surprised to see this sort of work from home trend fluctuate over the next couple of years as people really try to find their place. So I think you were great to say, take a breath, think about what best suits your company and take action on that. Don't get caught up in like, well, I'm never going back to the office, let's do this, or I'm definitely going back to the office, I'm not going to consider remote working. There's going to be a right spot for each company, and identifying what that spot is the key to it.
Yeah, and I think that's why I loved that graphic of the T Plus Studios did that just really outlined a hybrid approach, because I really believe that if you're unsure of how this is going to work and how this will pan out, what a great way to get people back into the office safely and quickly. And most important, well, not most importantly, but very important, is cost efficiency. I know business is slow for a lot of people right now. It's not a good time to be reinvesting in leasehold improvements for a lot of businesses. So moving some desks around, creating some sort of shift work where you have a team one come in week 2, or team one come in on 1 week, team 2 on the next week. Maybe you have your accountants come in a few times a week or whatever. All teams and businesses have different requirements, and I think that you can come up with a solution to utilize your current workspace to some capacity. And I'm happy that we were able to share some of those insights.
Yeah, definitely. Give us a shout to go through that space calculator. I think there's some real value in there. We'll get to some questions. I encourage everyone to check out the webinar next week as well. We are going to be bringing in an office furniture company so to sort of discuss those furniture options should you be looking to either retrofit your stuff or get new furniture to accommodate. It should be a really great topic next week. But let's jump on and get some questions going here. Let's see what we got. Let me just pull them up here. So we have our first one, if I can get it open here. What do you expect to happen with Vancouver rents? I'm going to let you handle that one.
Okay. Yeah, well, similarly to Toronto, I think the dialogue will be quite similar. We are coming out of a very, 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 very tight, fluid market where we had a 2.5% vacancy rate in the downtown core. We have similar landlords, Cadillac Fairview, Oxford, Bentall Green Oak, Hudson Pacific. These are all institutional, extremely well capitalized landlords, and furthermore property managers and leasing managers. So they know what they're doing. They were not irking for a deal to begin with. I have seen absolutely no evidence yet of them dropping rates or term obligations, and that is from discussions with their leasing managers and directors. So I would look to further our topic on subleasing. I would say that your deals are going to be on the subleasing side. If we see a huge influx of space coming back onto the market, whether it's defaulting or a ton of subleasing, and all the tenants are gobbling up these subleases, I would maybe expect at that time the landlords might soften a bit, but I just can't see that happening for a while. Like, they have the capital to weather this storm. It would have to be a really significant event of space coming back onto the market to see the landlords slashing prices. So I would expect the direct deals to remain somewhat consistent. You might be able to get away with a little bit of a shorter term on some of these deals, but it's going to be pretty consistent.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much the same in Toronto as well. But okay, next one is Gartner's company policy is that they will not be coming back to the office until after the second wave. Do you think the second wave is playing a factor in office reopening? That's a great question. I think it's inevitable that we get another wave and potentially a third. That's how these viruses and pandemics have gone historically, and I don't think we're going to escape that. I don't think that the notion of a second wave is going to stop reopening. I think that if you're waiting for that to happen, the economy is not going to be in good shape at that point. It could happen as early as summer. It could be fall. It could be winter. We just don't know. And I don't think that companies are going to be making decisions on a prediction like that. I think really what we're going to see is, one of the biggest complaints or topics when this thing started was, governments, communities, everyone should have been more prepared. And I think we have an opportunity now to figure out how to work safely that would shorten that, secondary lockdown if there is that. So I think it's almost more crucial to get back to it, start putting these protocols in place, Absolutely. Start addressing your size situation so that if and when that second or third wave do come, we're in a much better position to receive it, handle it, and hopefully get through it much quicker. So I don't think it's going to affect people reopening their office. If and when that time comes and we have to be shut down again, hopefully not. But if it does, we'll put that fire out when it gets lit.
Yeah, I think that it's. I totally agree with you on the point that what a great time to get out there and instill these new protocols and test out what this new normal is going to be like, because undoubtedly we are going to have this new normal. And I'm going to reference what the BC schooling system is doing. My fiance is a teacher, and they're going to be going back to school on a voluntary basis from June until the end of June. And she's an elementary school teacher. You know what that's like. That's fun day, sports day. It's a lot of fun, the end of school there. So why, they're asking, in their teacher meetings. And the reason that they're going back is because they want to get prepared for September. They want to understand, what is this going to look like in September? Because we are anticipating this. Why not, give it a trial? So I think that if you're in a position where, hey, you need to get back to work and have some sort of a capacity in the office, then yeah, I think it's a great time to start this hybrid approach and talk with your employees. But, maybe if you're in a position where, hey, we're working efficiently right now and we don't really see a need to get back in at least until the end of the year. We've invested in all these sort of, IT solutions. Maybe you don't rush back and try this out right away. You have that wait and see approach, but it's going to be different for every company. And if you're looking to get back in the office, I think it's a great time to get out there and give it a try.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's important to clear up that we're not encouraging people to rush back to a situation that's not, going to be beneficial for anyone. But I think companies still have to move forward and there will be this new working environment where it's partially from home, partially in the office, maybe. Some companies have already extended the work from home until 2021. Mm-hmm. There's different reasonings for each company to do that, and each company is going to have to address this independently. So yeah. I don't want to generalize everyone into, go back to work and see how it goes. But, we're in an opportunity now where we're looking at the light of the end of the tunnel.
Mhm.
We can set up our offices now so that we're much more prepared should this happen again. And I think, if companies are going to open up, they're going to open up regardless of what might happen down the road.
Yeah.
Um, okay. And another, sorry, what's that?
That was just a great question.
That was a great question. Yeah. Actually, there's quite a few good ones in here. All of our attendees are giving some good ones. Should the government step in and assist in providing commercial businesses with PPE, an additional cleaning service? I'm going to jump in to start this one. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't it be nice to receive a box of masks and sanitizer from the government? I just don't see that happening. The government has put out these programs to help companies, keep employees and getting them paid, to help, reduce the burden of rent. I don't see them shipping out boxes of PPE to companies. I think what the government should be doing is helping devise this guideline to what a safe workplace looks like, and help guiding peoples in developing those programs. If there was an opportunity to get the government to send some of this PPE, then great. I don't think it's going to be the case. I think that burden is going to fall, or maybe not a burden, and it doesn't necessarily have to, but I think an employer should be responsible, at least coming out of the gate here, of providing, sanitizer, maybe some masks if that's required. And that's the thought process there. But I just don't see the government providing that stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't, and I'm not going to go too in deep to that with my government and political views. We are, at the end of the day, realtors, commercial realtors. So I would, more to your point, I would just look to some of your provincial and federal, assistance and support programs that have been put into place. And if you're struggling to afford some of these new systems, and maybe you can address some of those support systems that they put in place. But I would not expect any support in that manner.
Yeah, and I think I could be wrong here. I'm not a lawyer, but I don't even think there's a legal obligation for employers to provide PPE. I think that's just a really nice gesture in showing support of your staff. I would encourage it, but I'm not saying that as an owner you're going to have to do that. But
yeah.
Next one: vacancy in downtown West Toronto. What's going to happen to it? There's going to be, I'm sure, and you can speak to the Vancouver market, but certainly in Toronto, there's areas that are more prone to certain industries. And your downtown West brick and beam space has traditionally been housing tech companies.
Mm-hmm.
And these are companies that are potentially more ready and more able to work remotely. And the downtown West brick and beam space is like the hottest market in Toronto for a while. And I think we'll see some of those subleases originating in those areas. Your financial core historically is your more institutional tenants, your lawyers, your banks, these sort of things. They're going to continue on most likely with their space. So, in those fringe areas where you have your brick and beam creative space, downtown West, King, Queen West in Toronto, Liberty Village, these are areas where those companies that are more apt to work from home are currently living, and we could see some increased vacancy in terms of sublets there in the near future.
Same thing here in Vancouver. I know that area well in Toronto. I did live in Toronto for a few years. It's a great area. We have an area called Gastown, Yale Town. It's sort of the brick and beam technology firm. Very, very, very popular. Rates are high there as well, almost competitively to downtown A-class space. Absolutely no vacancy. It's just impossible to get a head lease space in Gastown, especially anything larger than a couple thousand square feet. But more to your point, in this post-COVID era, we're seeing some subleases come up, and I anticipate that to continue to grow. Because most of the companies in that area are those technology firms that are able to work from home and adapt to this.
Yeah. Should tenants be asking their employees to sign a waiver before re-entering the office? I'm going to start this question by saying neither of us are lawyers. I don't know and I would encourage you to speak to an employment lawyer or something like that to get your true answer. in my mind, though, in my opinion, and that's all this is, I don't know if it's necessary to sign a waiver, for example. What you might do, though, is because now we're talking about working from home part of the time, and then in the office, you might be revising some of your employee contracts to reflect those changes, and that could be an opportunity to address, some of the protocol that you're going to be putting into place. I don't know if it's required or if it's a good idea to even ask employees to sign a waiver. I think it's important to send them out a written notice saying this is the protocol that we're doing. We ask that you abide by this. And at the end of the day, what you're asking your employees to do is to approach the situation not as if everyone else has the virus, but that they have the virus and they're trying to prevent it from passing it on to everyone else. Mm-hmm. And if your protocol sort of replicates that mentality, everyone should be acting safely and doing their best to keep everyone safe. But getting someone to sign a waiver, if I could see a lot of people having an issue, being asked to sign a waiver, like, why am I signing this waiver? I think as an employer, you put in best practices, and that's probably far enough. But again, I would encourage you to seek legal advice. If this is something that you're concerned about, I would seek legal advice about this one.
For sure. And I think that will it'll be very different for different businesses. Like, maybe a retail restaurant, if you're a server or something like that, you may feel a little bit more liable as if you're an employer than you are if you're an employer of a general office. But I think that you nailed it with your notices, your bulletins. You have the right information posted around throughout the office. You have those wayfinders. You look to the landlords who have been giving us guidance throughout this whole process as tenants, and they haven't asked us to sign a waiver or anything like that. They have been sending out daily bulletins, updates, what they're advising, what are the requirements, mask in the elevator. Maybe you're asking your employees, you must wear a mask until you get to your desk or whatever it may be. But again, as realtors, we're really good at deferring to our lawyers, and we would advise that you guys speak to your counsel on your certain situation, because I'm sure there's tons and tons of different businesses with different requirements.
Absolutely. Next one is, what should I do if my landlord doesn't defer my rent? So we put out a couple of webinars addressing this, so I'm not going to divulge too far into this. Again, landlords for a large percentage of landlords are not going to be overly proactive in handing out these deferrals. They're prioritizing the people that need it the most, which for the most part was retail. And then they're addressing office on a case-per-case basis. If you're it's basically like, come to me when you're out of money and let's talk. So there's nothing you can do to force your landlord to take action. It is something that we're encouraging landlords and tenants to work together on. We all have to come out of this in the best shape possible. So let's make sure that we're working together to get there. And what can you do if your landlord doesn't defer your rent? I'm not advocating not paying your rent. Continue to do that. You don't want a default on your plate. Have the conversation with your landlord. Talk to them. Show them the struggles that you're going through, or get a broker, like us to help moderate that conversation. But all we can do at this point is have those conversations, try to be reasonable, and hope that everyone else at the table is trying to achieve the same.
But I think that as a tenant, as this situation continues to develop, the leverage that you'll continue to gain is the fact that you are a tenant within their portfolio, and they're going to want to retain tenants. It's not a great time as a landlord to not have tenants, just because there's not a lot of direct head lease deals happening. So maybe this conversation is different in June than it was in March or April. So I was advised, as you had suggested, to continue a dialogue with your landlord. We have had some great success with our tenants on deferring these rents. So give us a call. We're happy to join in and, share some examples of what some other landlords are doing and some other packages and how they've, come to these agreements. So yeah, I would just say, give us a call.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note that, what we've been seeing here too is landlords initially saying, we're not giving deferrals, but like, give us a call in a month and let's see where we stand. And I think landlords are just they're careful about, I mean, they still have to pay their lenders as well, right? So, it's not like they are mortgage free and they're just like going home with your money in money bags.
Mhm.
Um, you know, keep that line of communication open. I think most landlords are reasonable people. And if they didn't give it to you on your first ask, don't go back guns blazing, but go back for a reasonable conversation and don't be afraid to have the ask again.
Absolutely.
Last one I think we have here. What are some of the concerns you've heard about working from home for the foreseeable future? You want first crack at this one? It's a great question. I mean, it's really what we're
It's a
talking
great
about.
question. I think that's it ties into what our whole debate about what to work from home or to get back to the office. So we started this conversation. Look, I think that the concern with the work from home for the foreseeable future is it's just not the way of life for most beings. Most people are social beings. They like a journey to the office. They like to, have a social drink or a social gathering on a Friday with their team. It's separate from their home life. A lot of people don't have offices at home. If you're in a condo with a couple, your fiance, your wife, husband, and some kids, where are you guys all going to be? People just might not have the space within their living situation and have adapted a living space and situation for them to be able to go to the office. So I really can't see, these articles where people come out and say, yeah, this is the end of the office as we know it. It's just, I can't, it bothers me. I just, I know most listeners here don't believe that as well, but I think that, that's pretty much the gist of it for me. It's just the collaboration and the productivity of an office. And I was thinking about this the other day. The most important thing about this is I don't know how you would start a new business from home. If you're looking to start a new business, and how many new businesses are popping up daily, even in Toronto and Vancouver, a new technology solution. How do you get together and have a conversation? How do you form that team if you're just behind your computer? I really can't see that happening.
That's a really interesting point because we've been talking about existing businesses, but
Yeah.
we haven't really addressed how do you start a business in this new environment. That's a really interesting point. And I agree with you. I think, the tenant there's always going to be two perspectives when it comes to working remotely. And one is going to be the employers and the other one's going to be the employees. And they're going to be different probably. And an employer's concerns are productivity, corporate culture, collaboration, all these things you just sort of outlined. And at the end of the day, the decision is the employers, not the employees. And I think, you have to be reasonable and you have to have all the tools in play to make it as safe as possible. But at the end of the day, that decision is the employers and the employers alone to a certain extent. Of course, if people aren't comfortable going in, they won't, and that's a different conversation. But most of the concern is around productivity and building your team, and that's really challenging to do working remote. So yeah, there are these companies, Twitter and these guys that are saying we're going remote. Like that's not going to apply for everyone. And I think there's going to be plenty of desire and requirements for office space. You need that hub. You need that communal space.
I think it's also important to note with that Twitter piece is they still have probably millions of square feet of office space, and they're not getting rid of that. They're giving their employees the option, which is great. They're giving them and some companies I know have had that option all along. So although it's a dialogue that is very popular, it's not even as if that was not a policy for many technology companies pre-COVID. So it will take some time, and we've talked a lot about it on this webinar that, it is a little premature to just say and suggest everyone get back to the office at full force here. It's a rapidly changing situation, but I'm hopeful that we were able to share some examples on how businesses are adapting to this and going to try to get back to work as efficiently and as safely as possible in this new normal that we're dealing with.
Absolutely. That's great. So that brings us to the end of our questions. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And of course, Marc, you're a total gem. Thank you for joining us and sharing your insight. It really was very, very helpful.
Yeah, thanks very much, Anthony. It's been a pleasure. I mean, this webinar series is just an example of a company like ours adapting to a new normal in a way, in a manner to reach our our users, our clients, our colleagues in the industry, and to have these discussions. Thank you for championing this. It's been a pleasure. I'm looking forward to following along next week with the furniture episode. And yeah, stay safe, man. I hope to see you soon.
Yeah, definitely hope to see you as well. And for everyone else, please, jump on and there's gonna be another webinar next week. Like we said, come visit us at titanyork.com or fire us an email. All of our agents and Mark and I included in that are more than happy to just have a conversation and try to work out some of these issues. It's something that we all have to work together for, and we're here to play our part. And I would encourage you, if you just want to chat about it, give us a shout. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. Cheers.
Cheers.